Oh, it looks like I am on. It's just you're talking to dark circle air closet. I don't know what you're talking to. We don't need that recorded. Ugh, I don't have that configured. Okay. Okay, thanks for joining me. And I don't have that either. So I gotta reconfigure some things so that I can record. I did put on a song, and if I get hit with that song, I didn't record this morning, and then I'm gonna have to figure out how to edit that without having my own copy of it, which is a real pain because the other one is much easier. So let me start recording here. There we go. Now all set. Okay, this is Dr. Feravich, Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am the teacher in the classroom. I also have a business that's called Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit, and I tell you that just because you will always see why am I doing this? Why am I even doing this? I'm doing this because I feel that we are so far off track, and our health is, it tells us about that, right? Our health shows us how far off track we really are with where we should be with our mind and the rest of our things. Our body is the first indicator that something's off with our minds, and something is far, far off with our spirits as well. And so what we need to do is each one of us need to figure out our own way to, first of all, I keep thinking of it like a phoenix rising from the ashes, right? Because I happen to think that there are probably a lot of forces that are not for good around here and in everywhere. But there are a lot of forces that are for good. And even if those forces for other things get you feeling down or get you feeling bad, you know what? The good forces, we already know who wins. We already know who wins the battle. We already know who wins the battle. We already know. We already know the truth outlives the lie. We already know it. Thanks, Jordan Davis, for that line. We already know. Okay, so today right now we are in critical thinking classroom is where we're at. And I think I just want just a minute to get some slides up here, because I didn't get all the slides up here that I really wanted to get up here. And I don't want to get nabbed for playing a song I'm not supposed to be playing. So just give me just a second. And let me get just a couple more slides up here. Actually, I'm going to kind of continue on. I know I've got enough. Remember everything. No, I don't. Remember, everything that we're talking about is related to Bloom's taxonomy. And so as I've said, what we're trying to do is, yeah, that's not going to work out. I can see that already. It's not going to work out for me because I'm not going to be able to add these things conspicuously or inconspicuously. I wouldn't want to add them conspicuously. That's the whole problem. I'm adding things conspicuously as opposed to inconspicuously. All right. We're going to do this. Let's see if we might not be able to do this really in a very cool way. Come on, you can do it. No, it's not going to let me do that. Okay. All right, so let me keep that up there for just a minute while I'm playing around with this. It's not going to work out. Okay, let's see here. Oh, Amazing. 0 dropped frames again. So it's not because I talked to Xfinity that I no longer have this problem. It's the fact that I talked to law enforcement that I no longer have this problem. It just happened to coincide with my conversation with Xfinity. So we got people a little bit nervous about their intercepting my cyber and my internet. So we got them a little bit nervous, which is good. Let's see. All right, let me tell you what I'm doing so that it's not just a bunch of hogwash over here. Sorry that I didn't get on this. All right, so I have to add the slides is what I have to do. And there's a lot of slides in here that what I'm going to first show you, I'm going to first show you slides that have to do with I know, no, I'm not. Have to do with a survey that I would like to give you. And I think that it is going to be helpful for you. No matter what you're going through. Okay, let's see. That wasn't the right one. There we go. Nope. There we go. All right. So the very first slides that I have here for you are the surveys that we've talked about. So far what we've talked about is we talked about this entity versus incremental theory. And the reason why it's important, as we've said, is because it helps us identify how we can master something. And when we master something, that is when we have all of those really great feelings that we get. So here I am talking about unhealthy bodies because we don't have healthy minds or healthy spirits. How do we get those? Well, one way is to master something. When we master something. And this is showing us exactly how we master things. But it's showing us according to one kind of perspective. The perspective is whether or not we have an entity perspective or an incremental perspective. Do we think that we learn in increments and therefore build our skill, or do we think we have the gift or we don't have the gift? You believe you have the gift or don't have the gift, you're entity oriented. If you believe that you can build your gift, right, whatever it is, if you believe you can build your gift over time, you are incremental oriented, or we also call it mastery oriented. We call it mastery oriented because you can see there in the far right column, it doesn't matter what your skill level is if you have a perspective that I can learn and become an expert over time. And this certainly is true to a great extent, right? We understand that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. And so what that suggests is it doesn't suggest I had 0 skill and at 10,000 hours I'm an expert. It suggests that we become experts through increments. And therefore, my skill, so you can see in the third column there, my skill can be high or low. If I believe that I am learning, I get the benefits of being a master. I may not have mastered it, but what happens in the process of mastering something feeds our body, our mind, and our spirit. In order to master something, you have to set goals. And once we set goals, we have activated dopamine. And dopamine is one of our pleasure sensories in our brain. It creates that feel-good feeling that we have that is a little bit different sometimes. Some feel-good feelings are different than others. A feel-good feeling of my son going off to college is very different than a feel-good feeling of when my little child gives me a toy because I feel sad, right? So we can have different feel-good feelings which activate different rewards in our brain, okay? Different, we call them neurotransmitters, right? So different chemicals in our brain, they're called neurotransmitters, and there are certain patterns of chemicals that are instigated for different activities. So it gives us a very specific reward. We have a very specific reward that our whole body gets. Chemicals in our brain, hormones in our body, actually activating hormones in our body. Dopamine is a hormone no, that's oxytocin. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not a hormone, but I could check, but I'll check on that. I will check on that. I'm not sure. So sometimes we have chemicals that stick only in our brain, and those are neurotransmitters. Sometimes those chemicals, like oxytocin, actually go through our body. We call oxytocin the love drug. So when we say hormones raging, that's oxytocin, actually. We have hormones for all kinds of things. But when we say hormones raging, that's oxytocin. So you can see differences in feeling good, right? I feel good in a relationship very differently than I feel good when I have acquired a goal. Like I learned a new song on my guitar, right? Or what about the feelings that people get when they set a goal to, basically control the whole earth, the planet? Like we see in the cartoon characters. And even though we call it hyperbole, even that's an over exaggeration of what I am trying to say, right? So a picture of a mad scientist is hyperbole. It's over and above really what I'm trying to say. But I wonder what that feeling is that is generated by those individuals who are power hungry, like the mad scientist in the cartoons that we see. Like I used to watch Underdog, right? Stuff like that. What about those? What kind of chemistry is involved in that goal as opposed to a goal to raise my child without fear, right? Or whatever, raise my child to be strong and courageous, raise my child, maybe have a courage lesson, right? And then I see that my child acted in courage. That is very different, isn't it, than if I were power hungry and that I got satisfaction out of having a higher profit margin and didn't have any emotional response to what I did to the people, right? So those you could see if we think about it for a minute, how very different our bodies respond to those events, all of them being positive in different ways, right? We could have a positive event where somebody likes an article we spent a lot of time on, so they give us a thumbs up, right, on it. And we could have somebody who gives us a thumbs up on something that took no time at all. Okay? Are those two bodily responses different? Yes, they're different. They're different. We have a very specific bodily response that comes with goal setting, and that is responding in a way that has actually two reward systems. And this is a wonderful thing about dopamine. Dopamine is unique in that it has two reward systems. The first reward system we get in anticipation of getting the goal. So I've said this before, use this as a great example. I don't know if anyone makes a date anymore, but if somebody did call up and ask you out on a date and said, we'll meet on Friday, if that ever did happen in this world, think about the excitement that you would have, right? It could be a presentation you're doing that for something that doesn't make you nervous, not for school or anything like that, but a presentation maybe of something that you invented, right? So a small thing that you invented and you're doing a presentation for that. And you're getting prepared, and as the Friday date for the presentation approaches, you feel something inside your body, excitement, right? And it gets the excitement gets greater the closer we get to that goal. That's dopamine. How do we stimulate dopamine? Because what that does is it's like a magnet for the goal and me. And dopamine is the magnet in between. And here's my goal and here's me. And that's exactly what it does. That's exactly what dopamine does. Start slow at first, but as you get closer to the goal, just like that. So that's the reward. What is that? The magnet in between that draws us wanting that goal more. And as we get closer, we get to it really fast, don't we? That's dopamine. Reward number 1, which is actually D2, dopamine 2, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure I do. Dopamine 1 is actually the reward that we get after we perform whatever. So now I did the presentation, I did the performance, or after the date, or right? So the dopamine of when we get the goal, and actually after the date, it's savoring. So we can stimulate dopamine so many times through this process of goal setting. Those feelings that we get when dopamine is stimulated, that's mastery. So from a biological perspective, mastery is dopamine. So what's my objective? My objective is more dopamine, but not to be like a big lazy slug expecting to get dopamine through, some kind of injection. No. And even if you did, artificial dopamine is not going to do what your body does for you, because there's such a natural chemistry that comes from being, this far away from your goal, right? This far away from your goal compared to being this far away from your goal. And how is some medication, and this is a shortcoming of all kinds of medication that we expect to be able to respond to our sadness or happiness. There are so many subtleties in feelings of happiness, right? Like the feeling of the happiness that I get when I get a thumbs up is very different in different circumstances. How is one shot of dopamine supposed to account for the subtleties in the building up of dopamine for anticipation and then being different after we get the goal? How in the world can any medicine account for that kind of subtlety? And that's what we're asking our antidepressants to do. We're asking our antidepressants to account for the subtleties that our natural system knows, even when we consciously aren't aware of it, right? So something we might see, is something as simple as a leaf blowing in the wind, and it spirals like this and it makes you smile, right? How do you get, so that's a little fix, a teeny tiny fix that I gave myself throughout my day, or that happened upon me throughout my day, right? These flowers here, the fact that I'm not looking at them, no dopamine, but now I spotted them in the video, and now I turn to my flowers, and even though I could look at the water, but look at how beautiful these flowers are. Look at how beautiful they are. And do you know what they cost me? They cost me $20. So when I think about that, that makes me happy too, because I was able to buy 2 bouquets of flowers because they were only $10. And I was very happy. So I could have gotten 1 bouquet of flowers if I wanted to for only $10. And $10, wow, we spend $10 pretty easily nowadays, don't we? So that makes me happy. And there's a tiny rush of dopamine in the subtleties of even glancing at those flowers, in the subtleties of seeing that yellow being my favorite color, that sunflower being my favorite flower, the subtleties in getting my dopamine. There is no match for it in pharmaceuticals. So they should have been thought of as highly ignorant to suggest that any vaccine can possibly respond to our body's needs like our natural immunity does. It's not based on ignorance because they're smarter than that. So it's based on something else because it's not ignorance. But we'll call it ignorance because it sounds a little bit nicer than what else I'm thinking it might be. Critical thinking class, that's what we're supposed to be. So we're talking about mastering, and I'm happy that I got to say that. We cannot master something. We cannot we cannot be faux masters. Faux. F-A-U-X. We cannot be faux masters. We cannot fake our mastery. It's a real thing. So, okay, let's I'm thinking about that phone call that I made and whether or not that actually was the post office. So that is like, if I'm not talking to the post office, that, folks, is a federal crime. So, behavior patterns, mastery versus helplessness. So, the only time, lucky us, that we see helplessness is only under one of the 4 different conditions that we see listed there. Only one of the 4 different conditions leads to helplessness. However, what's interesting is, and I just made this comment to a banker yesterday, we see a whole system that really is creating helpless individuals. And I want you to think about that. We'll talk more about what helplessness is, all right, exactly what it is. It's giving up. Helplessness is a feeling that my behaviors don't make a difference, and so I give up. And what I see is actually a concerted effort in destroying human spirit to get them to buy into the theory of helplessness. What I see is I see individuals who are in power, who are using psychology to help keep other individuals down, in particular minorities. And when I say minorities, I mean women as well, okay? So I see them, and in this day and age where we have got such a rise, not a rise, where we have shot the top off of the limit on our desires for sex and pornography, it should be no wonder that we have a system run by men of one particular color. The entire world is run by men of one particular color who are making the pornography industry as lucrative as possible. This one group of individuals. Then why wouldn't they be trained on suppressing women and oppressing women in order to have all of those things that they believe they earned kept at their fingertips? What do they believe they earn? Their title, their job, the reasons why they have pride, and then they take their sexual mate as well. This is a hierarchy that we're talking about, that we're creating. And I'm suggesting that we have a system in place that understands the psychology in oppressing women and other minorities in ways that lead to helplessness. As a professional, I see the very behaviors put in place and established by a legal system that makes people feel helpless. I have to call the post office for cybersecurity issues that I haven't had resolved since June. And the person that I have on the end, I'm pretty sure, is not the United States Postal Service. I'm calling, and it sounds to me like I'm talking to somebody down the hallway over here who's working in the back room of Walled Lake Postal Service, which is where I brought that bomb material to. So we'll see what Walled Lake Postal Service does when they have a federal crime on their hands. Let's see what happens in the neighborhood when they have federal crime on their hands. And this is all about, first of all, getting that information out there, because people can't make you helpless unless you put the helpless hat on, unless you bathe yourself in helplessness, in ideas of victimology, in ideas of pharmaceutical solving the problem, and ideas of thinking and believing that somehow science has put together medication that's going to alleviate your depression without any work at all, or alleviate your diabetes, or alleviate your whatever it is without any work. The work is the mastery. When we don't believe we have to work, we don't gain any of the positive responses. And then what ends up happening is we learn helplessness. If we don't engage our natural hormones and neurotransmitters, our natural body chemistry, you can't get it from someplace else. You can't get that natural body chemistry from someplace else. So that's what I'm trying to teach you to do, to use that natural body chemistry and how to produce it through your behavior. It's the way we produce the natural body chemistry through our behavior. So there are, despite the fact that we do have a lot of systems in place that are working towards getting people to fall in line, we've called them sheeples. We've used that word sheeples already, right? It's a new popular word. What that is, in other words, is helplessness is what it is. And if I have a system in place that's trying to create sheeples, then what I have is a system that is trying to create helplessness. Okay, now here are just specific qualities that we have of individuals who are entity-oriented versus incremental-oriented or mastery-oriented. The theory set uses the word incremental, and by the way, also so does the scale, right? The scale that we had here. Oh, I don't have this. There it is. The scale that we have here uses that terminology, so I'm tending to stick with it. But remember, I think the easier way to think about this is to think about it as mastering. So entity theories versus mastery theories. If I'm entity-oriented, I view my abilities as stable or fixed traits. They don't change. My skill for basketball won't change a whole lot to get me into on a professional basketball team. That's true. That's true. But other fixed traits, what about I just can't wash dishes very well? What about that? Well, somebody can master that. What about I'm not very good at math? Well, the truth is somebody could master that, right? So what do we say when we are entity oriented? We suggest that our traits are fixed traits. They're fixed traits. So they don't change over time, or they change very little over time. They change very little with experience. Now you compare that to the mastery orientation, and that views abilities as changeable. Not and changeable. View abilities as changeable. There's an emphasis on performance. So one of the things about entity orientation, and that I am trying to move you away from in this classroom, is we have obviously no grades. How can I possibly grade your work? So can you learn? So can you learn if you don't have a system that is grading your work? According to this theory, you can learn better because I'm not focused or fixated on performance, A, B, or C. Just like here, I am either learning the material, and I'm learning the material that I'm interested in learning, right? And I could learn a little bit, but the more interested I am, the more I'm going to learn. That's mastery. Mastery is chasing the things you want to learn. We talked about in the Bookless classroom, we were talking about Jamestown and the American history and talking about the story of Jamestown. Well, if I were only focused on, this isn't what I wanted to say, that's okay, performance, if I was only focused on performance, I wouldn't care, this is what I would say, I wouldn't care about really learning about Jamestown at all, not at all. But more than that, at the end of the story, what they say is that Jamestown no longer has any of the buildings from the first American settlement. So if you don't know, the Jamestown was the first American settlement that survived in the New World on the continental United States. Um, but they have no standing buildings. So they had a really hard time surviving in Jamestown. And so today it's an island. It used to be a peninsula, so you can't even get to it easily. But people come and visit, even though they don't have original settlement buildings there, every year because they have sort of reenacted the Jamestown scene there with storytellers and things like that. So if you wanted to master American history, you would be interested in going to Jamestown and actually seeing what they have there in Jamestown and seeing the settlements and asking your parents to take you there for a vacation as opposed to taking you somewhere for a wild spring break. On spring break, I can act like an animal, and sometimes that might be fun. Not for me at 57, but sometimes for some people it might be fun, right? But you're not learning anything. You are not feeding your body chemistry in ways that actually fulfill you at all. And this is the reason why I don't believe that we evolved from animals, because when we act like animals, we devolve. And when we act like something higher than ourselves, we see none of those rewards that are ultimate rewards, real body chemistry, keeping us, our minds, our bodies, and our spirit healthy. You act in animalistic ways, you act in depraved ways, you are not keeping your spirit and your mind healthy. You just simply can't be. How could you, be engaging in animalistic kinds of behaviors and expect that that's challenging your mind in any way? It can't possibly be. It can't possibly be. You're acting like an animal, right? Okay. So we need to challenge our minds in ways that aren't just about, for example, the grade. So in a mastery theory, it emphasizes increases in competence or knowledge as opposed to performing. Am I actually learning something, or did I just get a good grade on it? This is the reason why many people feel when they become adults that they're just faking it. That the adults are, I said that when I was young. I felt like somehow, some way, somebody was going to discover that I'm not all that I sound like I am. Lucky for me, I don't have that fear anymore. And unfortunate for people, honestly, unfortunate for people who can't find that kind of confidence, that kind of mastery, right? In the beginning, we may not be as sure-footed. But when we understand, naturally, we gain more knowledge. We'll know if we know more. That is a natural inspiration. Okay. Entity theories are other regulated versus mastery theories are self-regulated. All right. So there, and there's other words there that make it sound more complicated than it is. But we are reading a book by Erich Fromm. I'm looking for it. I don't have it right down here. It's upstairs. I was reading it last night. That is called On Disobedience. On Disobedience. And you're like, well, we're taught to be obedient, so that sounds like a book that's teaching us to be disobedient. And it's teaching us to be obedient to ourselves in this same way that we're talking about entity versus mastery. In an entity version, I'm other-oriented. I care about my grade, which comes from a teacher, right? That is being other-oriented. I care about what people think, if they think that I am smart or not, so I better learn this or they're going to think I'm a dummy. That's other-oriented. I better memorize these spelling words because we are having a spelling contest and I'm going to be embarrassed if I'm the first one out. Other-oriented. Why am I mastering a skill? Not for me. It's for somebody else. On disobedience, this is for our critical thinking, right? On disobedience is all about how do we stop being other oriented? Because when we are other oriented, we are a nation, a village, a community of consumers. I have to get, I have to get. If it doesn't come from the inside, we simply won't be fulfilled. We simply won't be fulfilled if it doesn't come from the inside. And that's the difference that we're trying to teach and learn between entity and mastering, between incremental theories and stagnant fixed theories or traits. Superficial processing of information versus deep processing. Now, this is very important in understanding the information. And we could probably all think about this, right? We could all think about how we crammed for a test. Superficial processing. Why did we cram for the test? Not because we wanted to learn the material in its best way to be learned. We crammed for the test to get a grade. So how much did I learn? I learned only enough to get the grade. If I learn because I care about the information, what I'm learning, I deeply learn it, right? So I cared about learning about Jamestown from the encyclopedia. And then when I pulled this book up off the shelf, I cared enough to read this. And I chose between this one and this one. And I chose this book as being the better book. Look at my deep understanding. And again, let's go back to Bloom's taxonomy. What did I do? I did a comparison and contrast. The first thing I did was I got information that was similar to what I knew. I got the encyclopedia, and then I pulled out this book of Jamestown. This book of Jamestown wasn't the opposite of what I was reading. It was exactly what I was reading about. It was similar. The first things that we do when we learn, if you remember from Bloom's taxonomy, is we see our brains actually do first a comparison to find out what is alike. And that's the reason why this kind of conflict and dissension among so many people here is almost impossible in ways to bring us together. It works exactly the opposite of finding similarities. It's focused on the differences. And again, I suggest that that is part of the psychology that they are using to break down the human spirit. I really think it's a system of things because they know if we continuously focus, and it's not a natural human tendency. Our natural human tendency, in particular, when we have a crisis, is to find our similarities. But that's not what the system is having us do any longer. It's looking at the differences and where you and I disagree. And that is for a purposeful breakdown of a system, of people, of a spirit. Let's not talk about a system. It is a purposeful breakdown of a system so that they can maintain their money, their prideful positions. Okay, so critically, I want you to think, you don't have to necessarily think about the system. We all know it's in place. It's a system to squash suppress our spirits. That's what the system is doing, trying to suppress our spirits. And that actually is what atheism does as well. It suppresses the human spirit is what it does. Whether or not somebody believes in it or not, that's what it does do. I mean, whether or not somebody believes in their atheism or not, what it does do is it depletes the human spirit because it gives no head nod to the spirit. And if we talk about in our spirit classroom, we need more than a head nod to the spirit. It's a real thing, and we will die out as a species if we lose our spirit. So that's what the system is doing. That's what the system is doing. Okay, and it's a system filled with a bunch of non-believers that promote a non-believing system, that promote that the highest pinnacle of this world is man, and in particular is white man. That's the way it is. Okay, and then success for the entity theorist, somebody that thinks our traits are fixed in our DNA, is that boasting when we succeed and when we fail we feel anxiety, shame, and helplessness. That is the outcome. If we succeed, we boast. If we fail, there's shame, helplessness, and anxiety. But for the incremental learner, when we succeed, there's pride and satisfaction. But when we fail, what ends up happening is a greater effort. If I believe that I learn in increments, then tomorrow's a new day and I could learn again. Even if I made mistakes in my learning today, tomorrow is a new day and I can learn again. So if I fail today and I don't believe in giving up, I believe in mastering, then what I will do if I failed today, if I performed low in column 3 at the bottom there, if I performed low, I will put forth greater effort and get me back into feeling like I am mastering something. Okay? All righty. Now, what I have for you is I have other scales. Here is a flourishing scale. And just a heads up, the scoring is on the bottom there. Okay, so if you don't want to see the scoring, don't take a look at it or print this out and fold that bottom part under. It's not that big of a deal, and I don't think it's that hard for you to determine what is an honest answer on these scales and what is a dishonest answer. But I just want to make you aware that the scoring is there on the bottom if you don't want to take a look at it. And then we've got what is called a flourishing scale. Now, this scale here is a scale that I give my students in their positive psychology class on pretty much day 1. And the reason why I give this scale to students on day 1 is because what it does is it gives you a baseline for any kind of, I'm going to call it psychological improvement. All right. So any kind of improvement that we might do in our mind, in our body, in our spirit, well, this flourishing scale can give us a baseline for improvement later on. Right? So if we decide to start, implementing some of these things that we're talking about, thinking about things as mastering something as opposed to thinking about it as being fixed. So we want to start implementing some of the things that we're learning. We might want a baseline. Where did we start when all of these classes started on critical thinking? And where am I in a month from now? Where am I in 6 months from now? Where am I in a year from now? Am I more towards flourishing? And when we're talking about flourishing, we're not just talking about simply getting along, going along and getting along, right? We are talking about getting the most out of life. So let's take a look at some of those questions a little bit more closely, and we can get a better idea of what flourishing means. So we can see there that it's on a scale that you're measuring from strongly agree 7 to strongly disagree 1. So a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being strongly disagree and 7 being strongly agree. And then what we see here is where we've got, so let's take a look at the first item. I lead a purposeful and meaningful life. Do you strongly disagree? Do you strongly agree? Or somewhere in between, right? Or somewhere in between. So if you have a meaningful and purposeful life, you would likely be flourishing more, right? It's not just do you feel like you are getting along. This is over and above. My social relationships are supporting and rewarding. That's over and above. It's not just saying I have social relationships. To flourish, we need to have social relationships that are over and above. I am engaged and interested in my daily activities. So you can see here that flourishing really isn't just surviving. It isn't just getting along, but it really is something above and beyond that. So that is our flourishing scale. So again, it will give you a baseline for where you start out with, and it will show, it can give you a clear, at least somewhat clearer picture, especially if you consistently take them and consistently see increases in your scores, then it certainly can give you a bigger picture of, or a better picture of, your improvement. It is actually a scientific measure. So you can say scientifically you have improved your mental well-being, which leads to creativity, don't forget, right? You can say scientifically that you improved your mental well-being by using this measure of a flourishing test or a flourishing survey. This is a survey regarding autonomy. And you could see the title there, to what extent do you make your own choices? So do you feel that you are independent and autonomous in your choices? Or do you feel that you have to answer to other people or other things in your life? This, we've got a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being not true at all and 7 being very true of me. So let's take a look at some of those items. I feel like I am free to decide for myself how to live my life. Not true at all of you, all the way through 7, very true of you. Number 2, I feel pressured in my life. Number 3, I generally feel free to express my ideas and opinions. Number 4, in my daily life, I frequently have to do what I am told. All right, so you can see here that we have got some measures about whether or not individuals feel autonomy, whether or not they feel that they have personal control over their outcomes. So see, many of these things then are getting to feelings of helplessness. Are you entity oriented? Well, that leads to helplessness, we know, right? If you're not flourishing, then you are not really running on your resources. Your gasoline is not built in positive ideas about yourself if you're not flourishing, right? I have no meaning, I have no purpose. And then this last one again, they are ideas about whether or not I feel that I have control over my life. So that is helplessness. If I have no control, I am not flourishing, so that I don't have these skills I'm building on, like purpose and meaning in my life. And I feel that this isn't going to change. All of those are variables. All of those are ingredients that lead to feelings of helplessness. We call it learned helplessness. Why do we call it learned helplessness? Because we learned to be helpless over time. It didn't just happen immediately. We learned it over time. Okay. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out to you is this, that there are some phrases, you can see there that the very first phrase is positively framed. I feel like I am free to decide for myself how to live my life. That would be a positive statement, right? It's framed in a positive way. If I said yes to that, that would be a good thing. Number 2 is framed in a negative way. I feel pressured in my life. If I said yes to that, that would be a negative thing, right? So we have got some positively framed questions and we have some negatively framed questions, okay? What we want to understand is how to score this, because if I score a 10 on question number 1, I feel that I have decisions in my own life and that they can work out. If I say that's a 10, then likely I will not say a 10 to the second question. I feel pressured in my life, right? I might say a 2. I might feel some pressure in my life to be able to make decisions for myself, right? But it's not going to be, if I feel number 1, that I can make a lot of decisions for myself, then I'm not going to feel number 2 is highly pressured in my life, because pressure means that I can't make my own decisions for myself, right? Okay, so all I'm saying there is watch how you score. If I score a 7 on question number 1, I wouldn't score a 7 on question number 2. It'd be more likely a 2. So my total score is a 9. The highest scores are those individuals who are demonstrating the most autonomy. If I said I don't feel pressured, if I scored a 2 on I feel pressured, so I don't feel that pressured, I should have a higher score than a 9, right? That is like a 7 and a 6. That score should be 13. And that's exactly what you do. What you do is you recode the negative scores to be their opposite. So a 2, a 1 would be a 7. So a negatively phrased statement, A 1 would be a 7, a 2 would be a 6, a 3 would be a 5, and a 4 stays a 4, okay? And then in this way, somebody would have a score of 13 for the first two answers, as opposed to a score of 9, which does not reflect autonomy. So the instructions are there. It tells you to reverse code the negative ones, and it tells you exactly which ones you need to do that to. 1 would be a 7, 2 would be a 6, 3 would be a 5, 4 stays a 4. It tells you which ones you're supposed to do that to. So you just have to know how to reverse score those is all. All right? Okay, so those are the 3 scales I wanted you to take a look at and how to score them. Now, the last one on autonomy, what that basically is it's a measure, in some ways, a measure of how much do you feel that you have control. All of these are measures of how much control you have. And what this slide is it shows you the benefits of having self-control. So when individuals have self-control, what we know is, first of all, self-control is a limited resource. So we can only have so much self-control. If somebody is challenging our feelings of self-control over and over again, what we need to do is we need to rebuild our resources, is what we need to do. Number 2 is strengthened by exercise. And so we know that if you want more self-control, you can exercise. And of course, exercise demonstrates control, doesn't it? It demonstrates control over our weight. It demonstrates control over our health. It demonstrates control over the number of reps that we do, right? I'm going to do 16 instead of 8. So of course we're building self-control. Can be cultivated through meditation. So now we're finding out ways that we can actually improve our levels of self-control. We can improve it through, let me get that up here. We can improve it through exercise. We can improve it through meditation. We can improve it by having fewer daily hassles, trying to organize and get organized. But those individuals who have more self-control do have fewer hassles and less anxiety. So this is a self-feeding mechanism where when I have more self-control, I have fewer hassles. And when I have fewer hassles, I have more self-control. So this is a self-feeding system here. We are able to delay gratification. And I'm going to talk to you guys. Actually, I'm going to write that down because we're going to look at a fun study about delaying gratification and the importance of that. Better personal adjustment, enhanced social skills, fewer addictive behaviors, predictor of college grades, and better coping skills. Those individuals who have more self-control. And in fact, if you can believe this, that self-control was a better indicator of college grades than high school grades. Your level of self-control or IQ, your level of self-control is a better indicator. If I get a good measure of self-control, and we have them, measure of self-control like that, efficacy one for personal control. So there's a good measure for it. And what we can see is that we find improvements across the board when we continue to have these measures of self-control, including better grades. So a better predictor of college grades than actually standardized tests were. That's what it was. It was a better predictor of college grades than your standardized tests like your ACT and your SAT, for example. Individuals who have low control, all of these are they are related to addictive behaviors. So even criminal behavior, that individuals typically engage in criminal behaviors because they don't have other needs satisfied. Okay, so those are reasons to build up our feelings of self-control. Okay, I started a little bit late, but I think that I'm going to stop here because it has been a really hectic day with some urgent business. We will stop here with what we read the other day about the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debates, or the integrity of our public officials, for sure. It measures neither wit nor courage, neither our wisdom nor our teaching, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. Okay, this is Dr. Annette Feravich, and we will be back here at what time am I going to be back here at? Let's see. I will be back here at 1:30 for our spiritual connection. Okay, and we all have our philosophical classroom today, and then our reading room, and then we'll call it a day. So thank you for joining me. I had 17 viewers this morning, so I am very happy about that. But most of them are probably from my problem earlier to see how I'm reacting. And post office, that's a federal offense if I'm not actually contacting the post office about my emergency. Okay, thanks.